Hello, and welcome to episode 22 of TBR, the To Be Read podcast. As always, I'm joined by Michael Ronn and Jamie Maltman. How you guys doing?
Patrick? Doing great. How about you?
Good. Tonight we're going to talk about ebook subscription services. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about how our reading has been going this week. So who wants to go first?
I'll
go first.
Yeah, go first, Jamie.
Okay, sure, no problem. I finally finished off that switching to the MacBook that I got out like 3 cycles ago at the library, and I started reading a bunch. Then I got the MacBook. Then I read a little bit, and then I got really busy with reading tons of other things. But I kind of flipped through the last like 400 pages over the past day because it had to go back today. So did that. Got a lot of cool tips, and it is a really good book. Really good series. So it's switching to the Mac. The Missing Manual series. And so if someone ever is switching from like a lifelong PC guy like I've been, it was extremely helpful for that. So there's that. I've been continuing to read The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, the fantasy novel. It's fantastic. I'm still really loving it. I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish it if anyone has a hold on it at the library after I finish it.
That's a brick, right?
It's the paperback is I think 725 pages.
Holy
Yeah,
cow.
I saw it sitting on somebody's desk at work today, actually, and it caught my eye because we talked about it last week. I was like, geez, I don't think I can be reading that one anytime soon.
It's so well done, though. It's really cool because it starts out third person until you get to the point where he's telling his life story. Then it's first person, but there'll be interjections where there'll be an interlude, and they'll go get something to eat, and they'll chat a little bit about something as an aside, and then he'll get back into his story again. And it's really cool. There's some music stuff, there's magic stuff, and he's one that took a long time to get that one out, but he really polished it, and it's an amazing first novel. So I like it a lot. And he's actually got a novella that I believe is in the world that came out fairly recently, and has been at the top of the Amazon fantasy list most of the times I've been checking this past weekend. And I've also been, I read more Arthur and the Beyond the Gate, the anthology that we've got coming out on November 11th. So I think I've got maybe 2 stories left to read in that before I've read everything. So very close in that. And that's pretty much my weekend reading. I got a few other nonfiction books from the library by, I can't remember the author, but I'll probably be starting on those now that I've finished off the MacBook.
Cool. Michael, how about you?
Yeah, we talked about this before the podcast. This is kind of one of my weeks where I've been reading a lot, but I've been reading a lot of different things. And so I'm still reading Physics of the Future, almost done with that. I really like it. It's talking about like medical stuff now, like medical the advances that he thinks will happen in the future, which is pretty cool, some of the stuff that he's talking about. But I'm reading that still. I read another book by Steve Scott, which I'm starting it. It's email marketing. I think it's called Email Marketing Blueprint, and it's about email marketing, autoresponders, all that sort of stuff that you have to do as a writer to maintain your mailing list. Nothing really sexy, but it's definitely a good book to read. And I'm still reading Sawyer Jackson, first book in the Sawyer Jackson series by Kevin Tumlinson, and I also reread 2K to 10K by Rachel Aaron. I remember we talked about that a few weeks ago, Patrick, and I mentioned that I didn't like it, and I reread it, and actually I take that back. I actually liked it a lot, and I'm not sure. Maybe I was just in a bad mood or something when I read it. But, yeah,
when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, right?
Exactly. No, it was good stuff. It's funny because we kind of have a lot in common. It's definitely a book for a lot of systems-driven people. I'm very process-oriented, so I like to have processes, and I think a lot of her techniques are going to help me with NaNoWriMo to up my word count. So a lot more nonfiction this week, but I hope to get back to fiction next week. So that's been my week so far.
Cool. I didn't get too much done this week like you. I think we've all been, I think we were all kind of reading furiously as much as we could get done before NaNoWriMo started a couple days ago, and now we're in a different mode. But I did finish Drawing on the Power of Resonance in Writing by David Farland. That was another one of the books that was included in the story bundle that was part of Nano. And it was good. I liked it. You can always pick a couple of little things out of these books. Not a terribly long read, but there's some good stuff that I was able to pull out of that. And then I read just a short story called "In the Shade of the Slowboat Man" by Dean Wesley Smith. And it was a story that he had mentioned in his book, Killing the Top 10 Sacred Cows of Self-Publishing, I think it was called. Mm-hmm. And it was a short story that he mentioned as something that he, tossed off in a couple hours one afternoon and has made a bunch of money off of it over the years. So I wanted to check that out, and it was available. I'm sure it's available in all kinds of collections, but it's also out there as just kind of a straight-up download. I'd suggest getting it as part of a collection. It was like a $2.99 download maybe, and took 10 minutes to read. Mm-hmm. But I'm glad I read it. It's a story about a female vampire saying goodbye to her husband of many years ago as he's lying on his deathbed. And it's a sweet story. It was good. And that was my reading. So I've got about 20 other things on the go. Maybe I'll manage to get one or two of those done for next week.
Yeah, I just need to focus. It's killing me. But it's like that every NaNoWriMo, right? I mean, the writing kind of takes a huge portion of your time, and then once December hits, then you're back to reading again. So
I think it's good practice, though. As the writing's good practice, and because you still want to find time to read, right? As the writing kind of takes over more and more in our lives, and maybe someday will time, I don't ever want to stop reading. So
yeah, me either.
I need to find a way to do both. Of course, right now I'm trying to do three things, right? The reading, the writing, and the day job. So
yeah. It'd be a lot easier if you only had two things, right?
Yeah, one of those things doesn't belong. I don't know.
Yeah, one of these things is not like the other. I wonder what that is.
but it pays the bills, so we won't get too deep into that.
Yeah.
So shall we move on to our topic?
Sounds good.
Yeah, let's do it.
Ebook subscription services. So are either of you signed up for any of those?
Yeah, I'm a member of Kindle Unlimited. Sorry, I'm a member of Kindle Unlimited. I started my free trial last month, and I'm going to renew my membership here this month. I like it so far. It's interesting because a lot of the books that I've been looking for are there, and I kind of view ebook subscription services right now because the selection really isn't the greatest. Mm-hmm. I think that they're more of a way to help you discover authors that you wouldn't have discovered otherwise. So like, if you can get a book for free by, say, Patrick Rothfuss, right? I don't think he's in Kindle Unlimited, but let's say he was, right? And then he's there, so you can take a chance on his big doorstop of a book without paying $24, for the print paperback, or 12.
So for people who don't know, how much is it?
It's $9.99 a month. Okay, so Kindle Unlimited, basically, the way the services work is anyone who's involved in Kindle Unlimited, any book that's there, you can read it. You can read it for free. The service is $9.99 a month. You get the first month free. After that, it's $9.99 a month. And basically, you get, I think right now it's up to 700,000 ebooks for free, plus audiobooks. So that's another nice rub, is that you actually get audiobooks for free as well. Well, not for free, but as part of being in the service.
Now, can any author, go into Unlimited?
Yeah, I mean, any author can enroll in Kindle Unlimited, but you have to be in KDP Select.
Okay, and then
that's one stream. The other stream is all the Amazon imprints are in there,
right?
And then there's a few oddballs that are in there as well. Like I think Harry Potter's in there, right?
There's some traditionally published titles in there as well. It's kind of odd because they get a higher royalty structure than indie authors, and but yeah, I mean, it's open to anyone. I mean, I guess if Hachette wanted to approach Amazon today, I mean, they could probably get their books in there if they could come to an agreement. But
so for people who don't know, if you're in Prime, if you're a customer who's paying for Amazon Prime, does Kindle Unlimited come with that, or if you're paying I don't know what it is now, like $80, $90 for Prime, it's an additional $10 on top of that for the subscription service?
It's separate. Yeah, if you're paying for Prime, you still get the Kindle Owner's Lending Library, which the book that's in KDP Select is also in that. But yeah,
That's only one a month, though. One book a month on that
Yeah,
one.
you get one book a month. And
Whereas Kindle Unlimited, you can have what, 10 books out at once?
you can you can have 10 books out at once, but if you want to do 11 books, all you have to do is return one of those 10 books. So it's kind of like a digital library subscription.
And so far it's in US, it launched in July.
Yep.
It went to the UK in September, I think.
September. Yeah.
And then it went to Germany in October sometime, and then it just hit today, I think, in Italy and Spain. I saw an email. So still no Canada. We'll be here. I don't know when, which is annoying because
it kind of sucks.
I can be in as an author, but I can't be in as a reader, and it's really, I don't know, it's a really fantastic one for getting access to indie works. And the really neat thing about it is just a little bit about their payment structure is any basically the authors get paid if you read past 10%. So approximately what would be on the sample that would show up on Amazon, instead of someone just reading the sample for free and then saying whatever, now if they're in Kindle Unlimited, if you hold someone's interest enough to get them past that 10%, then the author's going to get credit for you borrowing that book from Kindle Unlimited. So I think it's really neat from exactly what you're saying. Like if you're trying out a new author and maybe even something that's slightly different genre than you might normally, it's just there's no barrier to that. You're in the program already. You want to get as much reading in as you can, and you're just going to go try a bunch of things out. So I think that's really, really neat.
But I wonder if they've started to see the abuse that I think we've heard is likely to happen there, where authors are going to put up books that are 3 pages long. So you hit 10% on the first page. If you just open it, they get paid. I wonder how. I mean, Amazon will lock that down once it's.
Or the reviews will just ream them, right? And so if it has 1-star reviews with 500 people saying I got scammed by this thing, then that's gonna be the end of that. The other thing is sort of the in-between one that I've heard of some things is some people that might have released something as a novel might instead choose to release it as a series of serialize it or in chunks so that each one could count as a borrow and I don't know, kind of game the system that way. But I don't know that it necessarily has been an issue. It's interesting that it might actually be a really good thing for short fiction anyway, because first of all, the person only needs to read maybe a few pages of your short story for it to count for it, and you get a good royalty out of that. But if someone likes to read short fiction, you could read a ton of short fiction in a month, and you don't have to think about paying each time. So that if someone enjoys shorter formats, I think it works really great for the reader, which might be why Amazon might not crack down as much. They might actually be cool with it. It's just as long as the revenue structure works.
Yeah, I can't personally see paying for it. Where so I understand the idea that you get access to you can test out a lot of different things, but you can get that through the samples. I think a lot of the time, if the samples are done properly. I hate downloading a sample of a book and the sample is the title page, the copyright, the table of contents, and the first chapter or the first paragraph of the first page. Yeah, it's happened more than once. You're like, well, what the hell was that? So the other concern I guess I have with a subscription service like that is, especially with nonfiction, I like to, whether I'm reading on my phone, I like to, highlight sections of the book, select the text and highlight it, and as soon as you return that book, that's gone forever, right? Just like you've deleted it off your device. So
I don't think so. I think it keeps your notes.
But you wouldn't be able to access them because you don't have the text there anymore, right? So
if you re-download it,
it's persistent if you re-download. Exactly.
If you cancel your subscription, it's gone. But
you should test that for us, Michael. One of the books you get, highlight some stuff, download it, and see if your notes are still there. Because I think they're probably gone.
Well, that'd be an interesting thought too, right? Because what if you sort of mentally said, okay, do I really need 10 fiction books at a time? Probably not, right? So maybe you've got 5 fiction books on the go if you're really adventurous at that time, and then you've got another 5 nonfiction slots that you could be rotating through as, like you're saying, as long as it kept your notes somewhere. If you could come back to that later, that'd be actually really cool. Having access to it that way. So I don't know. I think it's a really interesting idea. There are, as I've been, seeing lots of indie authors and there's a lot that I would try. I would try it for sure for the test month as soon as it comes into Canada, and then sort of see how it goes from there. Because the big thing is, if you do really like an author, do they just have one or two things in KU, or are they going to be, they maybe have their first book in there and then the rest of the series isn't, or they only have one series in there to try it out and they don't have the rest of it. So that's
well,
where
you said they have to be in select too, right?
That's the thing, because they have to be in select.
Yeah.
So now, who knows? That may change down the road, so that it doesn't have to be exclusive to Amazon. But it's interesting. I was reading some neat stuff. Actually, I guess we should talk about. Have either of you guys tried any of the other ones? Oyster is one, right? Or
Scribe.
Scribd, is it Scribe?
Yeah, Scribe, however you say it. But before we answer that, we do have a comment by Amy Schubert. She says, "Curious, why would you use an ebook subscription service instead of the library? The only thing I can think is that Kindle Unlimited would include indie authors that wouldn't be in a library, but for anything else." And she also notices that she uses Overdrive to check out books from her library.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I actually was going to, I mentioned that on Google Plus when I was promoting the show today, because I think that's how I use it to an extent, is if I want that, because I know this indie stuff's never going to be in the libraries, or it's going to be a long time, or hard to discover, or complicated on that side of things. Whereas traditionally published, there's a bunch of stuff in Overdrive. Especially audiobooks do pretty well. Like my library has some better coverage there. So I would always go to the library first to test out a traditionally published author first, whereas I'm not going to be able to do that for an indie. So that's why, for me in particular, Kindle Unlimited's a little bit more intriguing than some. But because of my kids, I'm a heavy library user. So
one of the reasons I bought a Kobo instead of a Kindle as my first e-reader was because the Kindle isn't compatible with the Canadian library system. So I got the Kobo, downloaded it. It is Overdrive, so we may have to explain what Overdrive is as well. I don't know myself. Is that the Adobe? Because when I got the Kobo and the little sheet of paper from the library that teaches you how to connect to their system, you have to download like a piece of it. You have to sign up with Adobe.
Digital editions, yeah.
With an Adobe ID, and then you can start borrowing. And so I got the Kobo a couple years ago, and I haven't borrowed a single book from the library digitally. I just haven't gotten around to it.
So we've always done it through the app, because their app, it used to be kind of clunky. I remember back when I read 1Q84 on Overdrive from my library. It was a little bit. There were some rough edges on it, and I found it a little bit irritating. But my wife's been using it a lot recently, and I've even read some kids' books on Overdrive, and it's worked pretty well. So like we use it on my kid's tablet, or my wife uses it on her phone as well. So they have that app. Overdrive is a separate company that has that distribution stream to various places like that, and I know it is possible theoretically for indie books to get into it, but there's a bunch of checkboxes that your local librarian's not going to know about that they would never do in order to find that particular book. And it's even if people have asked them for one that they know is in Overdrive, sometimes they haven't been able to get it. So,
and I think Smashwords goes to Overdrive now.
Yeah,
that was a thing they issued. But yeah, I mean, I guess to answer Amy's question, I guess it's important to distinguish that. I guess ebook subscription services aren't like I mentioned; they're kind of like digital libraries. But I was just making an analogy. I think for me, it's really to support indie authors is why I would do it. It's a great way to check out genre fiction that you haven't read before. I don't know about you guys, but I've bought a lot of genre fiction books that sounded like they were great, and then I get past the sample, and it, for lack of a better word, sucks. And you're burned, right? Because you can return the novel, but it just I don't know about. I hate returning novels because for me, as an author, it sucks to see on my royalty report that I had a return. So I think it's a good way to support the author without. I mean, it's $10 a month. I think if you use it like you would use Netflix or Hulu, it can be a good thing. But yeah, they're not like a digital library, but for me, it's a way to take a chance on other indie authors that I would have never. Possibly
Netflix and Hulu, eh? You're just like twisting the knife with Jamie and I being here in Canada, because like our Netflix.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Our Netflix is better.
Netflix, yeah, but it's still
not close. Like not.
Yeah. Well, honestly, the Netflix in the States, I mean, it's decent, but there's a lot to be. There's a lot missing from it.
Ours isn't decent, and don't even talk about our Prime either.
Yeah.
Amy's got an interesting point too, that the one that actually has to compete more with the libraries is the Scribed and the
Right.
and Oyster and the traditional ones, because they are very much going out, like they have that same suite of products, really. Like, although it is easy, it's pretty easy for indie authors to get into those ones compared to through Smashwords. I think they're the distributor that does both of those.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of voracious reader that would get the biggest benefit from that is likely to be the person who goes to the library, right? Because they can rack up those numbers pretty quickly. So I don't know. That makes that a little bit tougher. I was reading some interesting articles today, actually, about or the last couple of days. It was in Digital Book World, talking about some of the things that there's. I can't remember what the name of the startup was. I could look it up a bit, but basically they're looking. It's one out of Russia that is a subscription service that is trying to add a social layer onto it to try and make people really stay in that ecosystem more. And so they're thinking if they've got better recommendation stuff going on, or like I was just thinking, if Amazon integrated Kindle Unlimited with Goodreads in the future, would that sort of, I'm just thinking of those two ideas coming together in a way, might make that work a lot better.
Yeah, that would be interesting, because I spend
more and more time on Goodreads.
Like Goodreads, I'm always on Goodreads. I love it for tracking what I'm reading and rating it and hoping to help it get better at making better recommendations. That's one thing, that Amazon's okay with it. Kobo's not as good, but I also haven't tagged as many books on Kobo as what I like, what I don't like. None of them are very good at suggesting Goodreads. But I continually hope that Goodreads will get better the more and more stuff that I put in there. But that would be awesome. I would love it if I could go on Goodreads and 5 stars to this book that I just read by this author, and it can immediately just, if I'm looking at another book by that author, just buy it right there. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, I'm actually finding it not too bad. Like when you go by shelf and do the stuff like that, if you start subdividing into some more shelves, that sort of thing. I've been finding lately that every time I do, because I don't go into the recommendations that often because I'm like, I just don't need my to-be-read list to grow any further. Mm-hmm. But every time I do go there, there's a bunch of books that I'm like, oh yeah, I really did. Like The Name of the Wind was one of those where every time I go there, it would pop up. So I'm like, based on my taste, that's definitely something I should be looking at. And everyone's been saying that, and they're right. The one thing I think that could be neat, especially if Kindle Unlimited did that a little bit, is some of the digital book clubs being able to work together and sort of pulling from that same place and have that connected a little bit better for within the subscription service. That could work really well.
That's a fantastic idea.
I do think that idea has legs, and that's going to be whoever can get that right might be the one that starts to really make some hay in that space. So it's a developing area. It's going to be really interesting to see where it goes. But then there's the other fear too, right? Of is this going to lead to the Spotification or whatever of royalties? Like, is there a problem for the music industry and the artists, right?
Yeah, my answer to that is no. And I'm going to do a shameless self-plug here. I actually, back in July, I actually wrote about a few articles about Kindle Unlimited. One from a reader's perspective, so kind of talking about all the stuff that we're talking about today. And then a second one about the future of ebook subscription services. And that's something a lot of people say, is that Spotify, Kindle Unlimited is the next Spotify. And I don't think that's the case, because I think that Kindle Unlimited that's just one type of ebook subscription service, right? Basically it relies upon getting as many authors as possible into a pot from as many different genres for it to be attractive to readers like you and I, right? But what if, I don't know, let's say, since we talk about sci-fi and fantasy here, what if 100,000 sci-fi and fantasy authors got together, or say 1,000, put all their books into a subscription service, and then marketed only to sci-fi and fantasy readers? You'd have a subscription service, and say they pay $4.99 a month. Mm-hmm. They get all the sci-fi fantasy that they want, and then all that money goes into a pool, and then once you reach, say, more than 10%, then that author gets paid. you know? So I think the biggest problem is the selection. You know, I think once they solve the selection problem, because if you really do the math, I mean, maybe there's 200-300 books on Kindle Unlimited that you would want to read. You know, once you start dialing it down, because they tote the 700,000 number, but really once you start dialing that down, you dial it down to fiction, you dial it down to sci-fi, fantasy, you dial that down to the subgenres you want to read, then you weed out the crappy indie books, then you weed out the ones that you just aren't interested in, and the next thing you know, you only have a small amount of books. But what if they targeted subscription services towards specific niches?
Absolutely.
You know? I think.
Well,
I think
not even just them. I mean, so there's authors could just do that themselves. You had 10, 20, 50 sci-fi authors that wanted to get together and go through Gumroad. Then, of course, you run into the problem of distributing the money and knowing how far anybody read and all that kind of stuff. But more and more, as the years go by, technology gets better, it'll get easier and easier for people to do that kind of thing and cut Amazon out of the picture altogether.
Yeah, I mean, it's just impossible for Amazon to. I mean, maybe I've heard rumors that they're going to throw all the KDP authors into Kindle Unlimited, regardless of whether you're in Select or not. Whether that actually happens, who knows? If it does, that's a game changer. If not, I mean, they're never going to get all of Simon & Schuster's catalog in there, or Hachette, or HarperCollins. I mean, it's just never going to happen. And they can start. The big five can start their own subscription service, but then they're not going to have all the indies in there. So you're never going to have every single book that you want to read, and it's still going to be the same problem of you go to Amazon, you go to Kindle Unlimited, they don't have the books you read, and then you wonder why you bought the subscription service in the first place, and then you unsubscribe. I mean,
and that's actually
I
was going to say that's actually a really good point, because I do know that in some of the sci-fi and fantasy circles, like some of the message boards in different places, when KU came out, I was curious to see what people were thinking of it, and especially in the sci-fi fantasy world, it's like if you can't get that author that you're thinking about right now, then you're like, this sucks. I don't want to even look at this. Like, I'm not saying I'm like that, because I've got, I'm looking into a lot of different indie stuff, but there's a lot of readers that are like that. So for them, they're always looking at, like, they already looked at the Scribd or the Oyster and said, it had this and this, but it didn't have that, therefore it's crap, right? So it's some people are like that. Other people, I would say, like, romance readers tend to have more, explore more different new stuff and just volume of stuff for voracious romance readers, right? So I can see subscription services working very well in that space, especially with indie side stuff. So, and I believe we're seeing that too with KU, that there is a lot of success in that. Just like there's a lot of success for romance indie novels in any space, anywhere, but it is another place that does seem tailor-made and make a lot of sense there.
So what about some of the other ones like Scribd?
I haven't used Scribd. I've used Oyster. I subscribed to Oyster back in the day, back when they first came out, and it was all right. I mean, they didn't have a big selection. I mean, it was, I think, I can't remember which big five. I think it's HarperCollins, where they've got a deal with Oyster, and they had a bunch of stuff in there. And I think they had The Art of Racing in the Rain, and I read that. And there were a few others that kind of were interesting, but nothing that like jumped out at me. I mean, it's like being in a buffet, right? You walk into like a buffet and you want there to be as much food as possible. You want there to be seafood, you want there to be beef and chicken and all these things. And if it's not there, then you're pissed off. Even if the food that's in the buffet, even if it's like two, three, or four things are really good, it doesn't matter, because the selection skews your thoughts. So you're used to seeing the big selection, even though you don't realize what's already in front of you. And so I think it had a quality catalog. It was just tiny.
Yeah. Whereas it's like if you go into the all-you-can-eat Korean barbecue restaurant, your expectations are there and you're happy, right?
Exactly.
You go to the Japanese Thai
Korean
buffet place around the corner from my house, right? Like it's just weird, but it makes sense in that context. So.
It's a psychological thing. I don't know what it is, but I mean the app wasn't bad. I mean it was kind of weird because, and this is just it's just nitpicky because I'm so used to Kindle and e-readers, but the app on the Oyster, you have to scroll up and down to read the book, and that drove me nuts. Because I'm used to swiping left and right. I don't know if they've changed that since I had it, but that alone made me want to put down the app because I couldn't switch between the two.
That sounds really annoying.
Did it have the like the sensor? Because I've seen some reading. I can't remember what they would have been because it's been a while. But the reading apps where, depending on how far you tilt your phone, it scrolls automatically faster and slower for you.
No, I don't think it had that.
No.
Maybe it does on the. I guess the Kindle Fire or the Fire phone has that capability.
Okay.
But I maybe it has that on Android. But when I had it, it was only iOS only. So
I don't like the scrolling. I like to flip the pages.
I like to
as well.
swipe. It's just so much easier.
Okay, so I think you're just checking for comments there.
Yeah, no comments.
We're good. Any final thoughts on? I think we focused mostly on Amazon. There are a ton. Actually, was kind of doing a Google search there, and the usual suspects come up. I will say I'm constantly annoyed and disappointed that Canada seems to get crapped on with this kind of stuff. Where it's everywhere but Canada, and it's not Amazon. It's Spotify. We finally got Spotify. Who knows if we'll ever get Hulu? What else there?
It's partly CRTC type stuff. Like that's definitely, like our Canadian radio television stuff. Like on the music side, I know that's a big issue on that side. So no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's the difference we've talked about too with Prime, how there's all these amazing benefits to having Prime, unless you're in Canada.
Yeah.
And then you get exactly one benefit, and it's cheaper shipping.
Which, if you buy books, you're probably not buying print books anyway.
Right.
Anymore. I haven't bought a print book in like 5 years.
Wow.
It's been a while.
I did look up a couple of those, like a couple of the ones that I mentioned earlier. So the one is called Bookmate in Moscow. That's the one that they're starting up. So that's where they're the one trying to build that sticky social layer. So they're trying to do author pages, book playlists, as well as the subscription to their phone. So they're really focusing on that mobile market too, which I think is, as more people start to do that, I think that's another thing that'll potentially drive these subscription services as well. And then the other thing was Oyster actually has added book lists as of, I think that was today. So there's a couple of different things happening. This space is moving. Like there's interesting stuff that's happening with that. So they're trying to so basically saying that like within Oyster you can create book lists of any length and share them with other Oyster subscribers as well as on other social media channels. So
I think the most important thing for any of these services, like you said, is going to be content. Because if I'm paying $8.99 a month or $9.99 a month or whatever it is, if there's one book that I want that's not in the service, it's no longer worth the money because now I'm going to have to go buy that book. Right.
If they can go this other way of if you and the people that are in this network together are doing a good enough if their recommendation engine plus your cross recommendations are doing enough to say, hey, here's this thing that I found in here, and that starts to happen, that's where I think that really makes sense. Then you're going the opposite way of I'm looking for this specific book going in and to decide whether to use this service or not. And you're starting to say, is my friend saying, oh, you got to try out this Oyster because look at all these books that I just read that are fantastic that are on here. That's if they can get the users marketing for them and continuing to make that sticky that people stay in there. I don't know. I think they're on the right track there with exploring it. I think people are probably going to screw that up badly as they first try and get it working, but whoever gets that right is going to have a chance there as long as they have enough quality content.
Well, it comes back to discoverability, right? I mean, who's going to crack the nut? And I don't necessarily know if it'll be Kindle Unlimited or Oyster. That's just my thought. I think somebody's sitting in their garage right now figuring it out. And they're going to be billionaires in the next 3 years. Watch. It's happening.
That's actually on my to-do list, is to figure that shit out.
Hey, this is a family-friendly podcast.
It's okay. I'm going to be a billionaire. I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So are we done?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So thanks for those of you in the comments for showing up. Next week we're going to be talking about comics and graphic novels, so something a little bit different, but fun for sure. As always, we'll be recording live on YouTube Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, and if you have a chance and you're subscribed on iTunes, what's going on there, Jamie?
Oh, I was just saying, and if you want to see these recommendations, check out our add us on Goodreads, so you can see what we're reading each week and have that. You can add us individually, but you can check out the TBR Goodreads page there as well. So TBR podcast.
Awesome.
And we're a review on iTunes.
Sorry?
And please leave us a review on iTunes if you.
There you go. Yep, we're all caught up on iTunes or wherever else you happen to be getting the feed. So that's great, and we'll talk to you all next week.
Happy reading.